Hello and welcome. The cost of living is expected to witness some substantial increase in the coming weeks. Now, this was after the inflation rate for October hit 11%, the highest since May last year. Government statistician Samuel Kobina reveals that this was as a result of fuel price hikes. We'll bring you a business desk report shortly, but before that, here is a report on the latest inflation figures.
This is the highest consumer price inflation since May last year. Transport, which includes fuel, recorded the highest variation of 5.2 percentage points in October this year. However, food and non-food inflation recorded the same inflation of 11% for the first time since August 2019. Here is the government statistician, Professor Samuel Kobina, explaining the rationale behind the increase in inflation.
All the other 11 divisions recorded inflation figures lower than the national average of 11.0. And what we want you to put emphasis on is the extent to which they depart from the national average. So you keep in mind that housing, water, electricity and gas stood at 20.6% relative to the 11.0 that we recorded at the national level. And transport stood at 14.9% relative to the 11.0. And as I indicated, all the other 11 divisions had October 2021 inflation rate lower than 11.0%. So clearly these two divisions drove the 11.0%. What we also would want you to keep in mind is that the 11.0 was also affected by food inflation that did record a deflation of 0.3%. And again, within the domain of food inflation, it is important to highlight the exceptions, that is, fruits and nuts and vegetables that did record deflation for the month of October 2021.
Behind the increase in inflation, on regional inflation, Upper West registered the highest inflation of 19.2%, followed by the northern region with inflation rate of 14.9%. The rates in Ashanti and Greater Accra regions were nevertheless above the national average. Here is Professor Samuel Kobina again.
From a non-food perspective, on a trend basis, we have for the second month in a row see a divergence between food and non-food inflation. So unlike year-on-year food and non-food inflation, where we've seen a convergence, we've seen a divergence of about 1.6 percentage points between non-food inflation and food inflation, with non-food inflation dominating with 1.3% and food inflation standing at negative 0.3%.
Followed by the northern region with inflation rate of 14.9%. The rates in Ashanti and Greater Accra regions were nevertheless above the national average. With inflation going up albeit slightly, the Bank of Ghana could be forced to take a critical decision to forestall the increase in the average change in prices of goods and services within a period.
We still stay with inflation because even as Christmas season draws nearer, it is expected that demand for some goods will go up. But what is causing the spike, and should we be worried about this development? There is more in this report.
The Ghana Statistical Service in its data noted that the 0.6% hike over the last month was largely due to increasing fuel, transport and food prices in the country. This forced the rate to hit 11%, the highest since May last year. The service in the report also admits that the rise in prices of items reduced locally. For some analysts, this reflects the true state of affairs on the market. There are fears that it could even get worse in the coming days as we approach the festive season. This may force the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana to hike its policy rate. It could also lead to the cost of credit going up in the country as the Bank of Ghana takes several steps to ensure that inflation does not get out of hand. This is because it could erode gains made so far when it comes to ongoing economic structural reforms. It also increases the cost of living, a move that may compound ongoing challenges that most consumers go through as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, let's put all this in perspective, and we're joined via Zoom by energy strategist Dr. Yusuf Sulemana. We're grateful that you could join us. Increases in fuel prices caused October inflation to hit 11%. It was expected, right?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon to your cherished viewers, Charles. I hope you can hear me well, Charles.
You're loud and clear.
Thank you. Yeah, so certainly this is inevitable. If you closely monitor, this fuel price trajectory for the last 1 month, it has taken this bullish trend, that is the upward trend in the fuel prices, and that has cascaded into our pumps or within our pumps. Now, if you look at inflation, we have something called the cost push inflation. This is certainly what is playing out. Now, fuel prices cascade to almost every facet of our economy. And so to the extent that if we are not able to arrest the rapid rise in fuel prices, it is inevitable that it will have a cascading impact on every aspect of the economy, be it transportation, be it goods and services. And so if you look at the aggregate of goods and services going up overall, that is just natural that inflation is going to go up. So until we are able to arrest the rapid or the skyrocketing fuel prices as we have it now, then we could still be expecting something worse to come. And that is not so good because at the end of the day, that will impede, consumer spending, and that will also not enhance economic growth.
But of course, you listen to the policymakers, the finance minister, and he helps us understand the fact that, based on his own argument, fuel prices are high on the global scale. So definitely we should be expecting the ripple effect here in Ghana. But is it a justified argument to make when it comes to the situations we're having currently and the need for government to intervene?
Yeah, so he's right that, this is a global phenomenon, Charles. We have energy crunch, and that's a fact. But nations will have to look inward, and they have to be, inward, homegrown strategies that will be able to, help nations to withstand this kind of shocks when they come. Now, if you look at our situation, I think we haven't prepared for this kind of shocks. They have been coming up and down. It's sinusoidal. It comes and goes. But we seem not to get ourselves prepared whenever it hits us hard. And so nations will be affected, or the degree or the impact of this, global energy crunch on nations will be highly dependent on those nations' preparedness inwardly. What is our preparedness? If you look at our situation, Charles, I always call that we have segregated our upstream and our downstream and operated as independent entities. Most nations who export and import hydrocarbon products will be able to link up these two sectors. And when these two sectors are linked up, what will happen is that when these prices take this upward trajectory and then downward trajectory, you can fall on either your upstream side or your downstream side. So long term, I think that's what way to go. So yeah, the finance minister saying that, it is a global phenomenon. That is a fact, but we have to strategize to be able to withstand this kind of shock. Otherwise, if we keep on saying it's a global phenomenon and then we are not doing anything, then we're going to have ourselves blamed. For instance, if you look at the US right now, they are thinking about releasing their strategic reserve to push in the market because the entire market, global market, is getting heated up, and that's factual. US is thinking of releasing some of their strategic reserves. Just, we are living from hand to mouth. We've been calling several times, over the years that let's improve our strategic reserves. Let's have a local refining, So in situations like this, even though you might not be able to reduce prices drastically with having a local refinery, but at least you'll be able to stabilize the prices. So we do have long-term measures, that we can put in place, to be able to withstand, to be able to get ourselves prepared when these things hit. Short-term, I think we have to look at our taxes. And I believe that the finance minister will have to look at that, yeah.
Indeed, and he shall do that in the 2022 budget. We're expecting some particular word in that direction. But what do you make of calls by the transport unions to scrap some taxes on petroleum products? Because they're saying that these taxes are really the build-ups to, causing any increase in transport fares.
Yes, again, that's factual, and it's also a given. If you look at our price build-up, there are three categories or three elements that goes into a price build-up when you categorize them. We have this global prices, oil prices in the international market that affects the price build-up directly. We also have the exchange rates, and then the third component is the taxes and lift. Now, the exchange rate is not all the best. It's not the best. It could be better. Global oil prices in wide now. It is something that we are not able to control. So the only component within our control now, as we speak, is will be the taxes. So it is just a legitimate call that these players, and the call has been there for quite a long time, for players to call for the fact that some of these taxes have to be relooked at, either to take them temporarily off to cool the market, and then we can think about bringing them back when the market cools. Otherwise, if you look at our price build-up, closer to 50% charge is made up of taxes. And so if about 50% made up of taxes, and then you don't have control over your exchange rate as at the moment because of the approach of festivities, and then back input that we do, and also you don't have control over the global oil prices. The only thing is to look at the taxes. And so I think the government is beginning to heed the call, because quite essentially the price stabilization levy has been removed. Albeit it didn't make that much of an impact, because the global dynamic is still not working to the favor of the poor consumer. But I think that kind of direction is a direction, that kind of signal of the tendency of trying to touch some of the taxes is a signal in the right direction. And we need to look at some of them. Look at some of the taxes that are outlived their useful lives, and then try to take them up, at least however short it could be, so that we can cool the market. Yeah.
But beyond the matter of taxation, we're expecting the finance minister to present the budget. Of course, as you're sitting, from where you're sitting as an expert in this particular field, help us understand the priority lines that government must take in the budget to ensure that not just, we're not just reducing taxes, we're not just leveling the playing field, but we're also making sure that we are playing within our budget, because that's all that matters moving forward.
Yeah, correct, Charles. What I expect in this budget is it's just the same as the expectation that I put across when they were about to read the media budget. Charles, in situations whereby economies are recovering, you have to put in place policies and programs that will stimulate economic growth. Economic growth will be stimulated when consumer spending is reactivated. Consumer spending will not be reactivated when goods and services are very high. And that's a fact. Right now, goods and services are very high. So it will impede, it is a serious impediment to consumer spending. And so what I expect the budget to do is to look at policies, is to look at measures that will reactivate consumer spending. Policies and measures that will make sure that, petrol prices don't go up again, in short. Because that is the borderline. If there is continuous hike in fuel prices, I don't think we're going to understand our microeconomic parameters. That we cannot understand it. So going forward, what I think is that the policies should gear towards, creating value for the economy, which gravitate to, let's say, import dependent to a raw material, to add on value to our raw material. The budget has to look at stimulating economic growth. The budget has to look at probably cooling down the market. That's the immediate thing that has to be done. And then cooling down the market, I think the taxes is something that cannot escape the finance minister. And I think the credible candidate at this moment in time will be the SPT, the Special Petroleum Tax. And I'm saying that because if you look at the, prior to the introduction of this SPT, we have a similar situation that we have now, but in the opposite direction. I do mention that when you link up your upstream and your downstream, they tend to support each other when the need arises.
Great.
Remember, the SPT came because we had substantial, decrease in terms of revenue that we gain from the upstream, and so we decided to use the downstream to cushion that. This is the time we have to use the upstream to also cushion the downstream. Other than that, all the gains that you are gaining from the upstream, it will be traded by the downstream, especially when the market get burned out. So I expect straightforward two things. Let's reactivate consumer spending. Reactivating consumer spending, we have to bring down goods and services. And that would stop, and that would be like just stopping fuel hikes. If you're able to stop the fuel hikes, put in measures that can stop the fuel hikes, I think we are going to understand the paradigm that we want to move.
Great.
And I think that's the way to go. Yeah.
Great. And just before you go, Doctor, we're having this discussion in the back of COP 2016 where global economies are deliberating on ways of going green. And of course, we've been having this discussion once again on petrol prices for quite too long a time. How do you respond to debate or argument for the need for us to move towards alternative sources of, electrifying our vehicles and even that of our modes of transport systems in Ghana when it comes to energy?
Yes, I'm always of the view that we have to support diversification. Number one, because well of hydrocarbon is finite. It will leave us, but it's just a matter of time. But Charles, we don't diversify to the detriment of your energy security. That is very key. Because as we speak now, the well of hydrocarbon is very key to our energy security. And so as we diversify, we have to be very careful and very cautious. But let me move straight to your question. Assuming the well of renewables or green energy or whatever that we talk about become competitive, this kind of burnout in the market that we are seeing now, we will not see it. So what I will continue to call for the champions of green energy, where all of us are clearly champions of green energy, let's invest into R&D, what we call research and development, to make alternative energy sources competitive. Assuming electric cars were competitive now, to hell hydrocarbon, but it's not competitive, right? So I think the main thing is to make sure that all these alternative sources, the cost is very key. Because when we talk about energy security, three things are coming in charge. We have affordability, dependability, and then availability. If you cannot have these three, then forget about energy security. And so electric cars, they are way to go, they are very important, but if you can get them at competitive rates, then I think we can diversify, and then the pressure on hydrocarbon will be minimized. Right now, the pressure that we have on hydrocarbon is simply too much. And so if we are having electric cars at this moment, that would have helped. But cost-wise, it's simply not the way to go. So research and development is very important so that we can bring down the cost of these electric cars. And when that happens, I think that's the way to go. And we'll all be smiling. And I'll be happy to drive an EV car, yeah.
I can imagine. Dr. Isi Suleiman, we're grateful that he could join us. And he's an energy strategist helping us understand matters regarding the fuel price hikes and how best we could balance the matter of, climate change and the need to go green. Speaking of climate change, Ghana has today officially signed the Declaration on 100% Zero Emissions. Now, this gives Ghana the chance to start moves to transition from fossil fuel-powered vehicles to e-vehicles, that's electric vehicles. The Environment Minister, Dr. Kuku Ifrie, actually signed it on behalf of Ghana and spoke to my colleague Seth Kwame Boate.
We are very pleased to have signed up to this key declaration on zero-emission vehicles as one of the contributors, determinants of this whole problem of, global warming through greenhouse gas emissions. The COP26 declaration is a landmark global agreement, and we're pleased to join other national governments, states, cities, and private sector to deliver this commitment. Ghana is already leading the way on a shift to ZEVs in West Africa through looking at options to reduce taxes on EV imports and developing charging infrastructure. To achieve this, towards the Paris Agreement, we know we must globally go faster. I would say we have to accelerate our effort to transition to 100% zero emissions in the shortest possible time. That's what I can say for now.
All right. So what does this, signing on to this declaration, are there some things we have to do, and what are the time frames that some needs that we need to meet?
Oh, okay. Of course, there are other policy issues following from this declaration. There are policy issues that we have to look at, and then of course we may even go to legislation and then regulation. So all those things we have to put in place so that we transition quickly towards that. But we must carry people along with us. Okay. This whole thing is about carrying people so that we can reduce our carbon footprints. The truck carbon footprint must be recognized. The bus, Ayalolo carbon footprint, the timber truck footprint. Today I've seen a truck which has been, a vehicle which is a truck. But that was one of the problem areas. But apparently technology has been developed which is addressing those issues. So we will quickly transition into, absolute 100% E vehicle in the shortest possible time.
What will be government's policy?
Well, let's say that we are not there yet. the intention, that's why we signed this declaration. This declaration paves the way to do that. You can even deduce from this that Ghana's policy will be to also, you know, if at least assemble in the short term, and even go on to manufacture vehicles, these e-vehicles. It's always been our aspiration. You know, government is assembling vehicles through some of these large companies. And so it goes without saying, without any equivocation, that that is the policy of government. But of course, we have to learn to, you know, crawl before we walk.
The Environment Minister, they're hinting of moves by governments to introduce electric vehicles to cut emissions and carbon footprint in Ghana. Away from that, government has set a target to attract billions of dollars worth of private investment into the development of the Keta port in the Volta region. According to the Transport Minister, Kweku Ofori-Siama, feasibility studies have revealed that the first phase of the project will cost about $650 million. That's $650 million. He, however, expressed concern that government alone could not fund the future seaport of Keta, which is expected to become the country's third port platform after those of Tema and Accra. Meanwhile, the board chair of the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority, Isaac Osei, says concerns raised by indigents of Keta on the project will be factored in to provide a win-win situation for all stakeholders.
Our plan is to ensure that no interested party or stakeholder is left out as we get into the subsequent phases of this project. Hence, our determination to ensure that your inputs are captured and incorporated into what we have. Today, we will be sharing with you findings of the feasibility study which has been conducted on the Port of Keta project, as well as some of the things that have been done behind the scenes. As an authority, we are not oblivious of some of the issues and concerns that have come up from sections of the populace in the area. And I'm happy that during our recent visit to introduce the new governing board of the authority to the revered Awomefia of the Anlo State, Toby Street III, and his traditional councils from Keji and Keta, they all assured us of their support, unflinching support for this project. In our collective determination to answer the call of our government to ensure the coming into being of the Port of Keta, their support and collaboration is imperative. I would like to assure all our esteemed stakeholders that beyond this engagement, the authority will always be ready and willing to welcome new ideas and suggestions on the way forward as we progress.
Well, that'll be it for this edition of The Marketplace. I'm Charles Aite. For more news, to log on to myjoyonline.com, where you can see the trending story in business. Fuel price increases push inflation to 11% in October 2021. This and other stories also you could find on the page. Many thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of our programs.